and other innovations. This is exactly the name of our session number 6. All these terms or concepts have been covered many times during this conference, and now we shall discuss with experts representing different, so to say, aspects, and we'll talk about the challenges that the Czech agri-food businesses will be faced with. They'll try to give us answers, which is why I'd like to ask them to join us here on the stage. Professor Zdeněk Opatrný, Faculty of Sciences, Charles University, and then Luc Haustermans, President of Europe, then Emily Negrin, Vice President of Corporate Affairs of INARE, and then Mr. Neal Evans. I wish to welcome Operations Director of the Voluntary Initiative. And last but not least, I believe we have Madam Mute Schimpf from Friends of the Earth International. So,
dobrý den. Nice to see you, Mrs. Schimpf.
Hello, welcome.
Perfect, we hear you. So I will continue a few words in Czech and then, of course, in English. Dovolte mi, abych ještě ve stručnosti naše panelisty představil.
Well, I will introduce the speakers. Professor Opatrný is one of the founders. He started as pioneer studies of application vitro techniques for understanding of mechanisms of plant morphogenesis. And that, as I've said, he is emeritus professor of the Charles University, and he's the author of nearly 200 scientific publications and several monographs. Luc Haustermans is the head of PR at the Europe. He joined the company 8 years ago. Then he was the director, then vice president for innovations. He developed new commercial concepts for agriculture and low carbon production. He also contributed to the innovation plan aiming at decarbonization, then production of clean ammonia as a marine or ship fuel. So be most cordially welcome. I'm also happy to say hello, Madam Mute Schimpf, Friends of the Earth International. She is a Master of Agronomy. She has work experience for various civil organizations on agriculture, trade, biodiversity, food and GMO in Germany, as well as at the European level. Now she is a food campaigner with the Friends of the Earth Europe, and she's a member of the board of TP Organics as well.
Naším dalším hostem je viceprezident.
Next, we have Madam Emily Negrin, the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at INARE. She graduated from the Minnesota University, USA. She has worked for many years in global marketing and communication before landing at INARE, where she is responsible for developing stakeholder relationships across the supply chain to be able to deliver sustainable solutions to the INARE company. So be most cordially welcome. And I also appreciate very much the opportunity to welcome Mr. Neal Evans, who originally worked in research aimed at understanding the epidemiology of plant diseases and developing models for disease prediction in the US. He was involved in pistachio disease research at the University of California, Davis, before returning to the UK in order to work at Rothamsted Research. Neal Evans joined the voluntary initiative 4 years ago, focusing on pest management practices in order to help protect water and the environment.
For you all, our guests. Which of these factors, like climate changes, drought, or new genomic techniques, is the biggest challenge from your point of view? Are we ready to face these challenges, and what other challenges will European agriculture and food face? Maybe a lady first.
Thank you. I think the biggest challenge we face is really around climate change. And the objectives around climate change are similar throughout the world. It's the approach in which we address these challenges where we are starting to see some differentiation. So Inari is a seed design company. We are focused on designing seeds that meet the needs of the world. And we're doing that through AI technology and advanced gene editing. So we truly believe that there is a great deal of potential within the seed itself that we can unlock and really gain sustainability potential that meets the needs not only of our planet, but the people who are growing our food and feed and fiber, and also the greater population. So what is it about gene editing technology that we believe is different from some of the other technologies that have been available? And it really boils down to some key revelations that we have seen in just the past 10 years alone. So when we look at the incredible advances that have taken place in terms of genome sequencing, we now understand things about the plants itself that we never understood before. And we're finding pathways within the natural DNA of the plant so that we can find new ways to unlock power within the plant itself to really enhance its full potential. There's also been amazing advancements in AI technology. So we're able to process data in new ways so that we can make more informed decisions faster. And the other key revelation is just in technology itself. It's incredible when you think all that has been done with CRISPR, and CRISPR just celebrated 10 years this year. So we've made incredible advancements with this fairly new technology in a pretty short period of time. And all of this is coming together as the world is recognizing a very extreme need to address sustainability. And it's not enough just to think about how do we prevent further damage to the planet, but how do we also equip our farmers today with the tools that they need to deal with the challenges that climate change has put in place on them today. You know, things like drought, extreme weather conditions, these are the realities of farmers today, and we need to provide them with solutions today to ensure that they can continue to meet those needs. There was a intergovernmental panel on climate change, and they talked a lot about the need for this dual approach to not only have tools and technology that are protecting our planet, but also that are adapting to the changing climate. We've also seen numerous productivity reports coming out that are showing that, you know, the historical productivity gains that we have kind of grown accustomed to are starting to decline because of the impact of climate change. So if we want to continue to meet the needs of a growing population, and we want to continue to care for our planet to ensure that, farmers like Mike can hand down his farmland to future generations. We need to equip them with tools that meet the realities of today. So, I think the Green Deal is a wonderful initiative, but it does require innovation. And, it's been talked a great deal about, when you look at the United States and Canada and Latin America, Japan has their gene-edited tomato out on the market. You are seeing other countries move this technology forward. And I think it's because of the realization that it is a reasonable and safe tool to use in meeting the needs of the planet and the people. And, we need regulations that are right-sized and balanced and scientifically based to ensure that we can realize the full potential of this technology. And a little bit about Inari. So our company is only 6 years old. We have about 250 employees across 3 locations. So we were started in the Boston, Massachusetts area. We also have our probably largest facility in Indiana, where there's a lot more farmland to grow on. But we also have a facility in Ghent, Belgium. And, all of these locations are incredibly important to us. A lot of our initial scientific research is done in Boston and in Ghent, and then we do a lot of the product development then in Indiana. And we have, our primary focus is on corn and soybeans in the United States, and earlier this year we signed a partnership agreement with Negrin out of Australia to begin working on wheat. In the United States, we partner with independent seed companies. So we will develop the seed and then sell what we call parent seed to the seed companies. They will then bulk that up and sell it under their own brands to their farmer network. We are very proud this year during the growing season to offer 12 of our independent seed companies our first gene-edited soybean to use in their test fields. So they were able to start showcasing this technology to their farmer network and talk about the potential that was coming. And this is something that will be moving forward, and there will be a limited number of farmers growing this crop next year. And we will have other gene-edited soybean in the market probably in the next few years to come. So we're really excited about the potential. And one of the biggest questions we get from farmers in the U.S. is, what are we doing to help ensure that there is a robust export market for these products? Because farmers in the U.S. are excited to use the technology. They see the benefits of it. And as I said, we've had really wonderful conversations, across Latin America about it. So we're eager to equip them with the tools that they want. We very much believe in farmer choice and, creating pathways for a variety of different technologies to ensure farmers can make the decision that's best for their production and their land in order to continue to feed a growing population.
Thank you for your answer and also for introduction. Your 6 years old company, Inari. Ladies and gentlemen, I give space to our another guest, Mute Schimpf. The floor is yours, and we are waiting for your answer.
Thanks a lot for the invitation and the opportunity to present our view and assessment. For us, the biggest challenge is definitely the climate crisis. And as it was mentioned various times in the last 2 days, agriculture is caught in a vicious loop. On one hand, farming is contributing relevantly to the greenhouse gas emissions and to the climate change. But the agriculture sector also struggles with the impacts and the consequences of these climate disruptions.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Schimpf. I'm so sorry. Please try to get closer to the microphone, because our interpreters can't translate to Czech so well. Yeah, perfect. We can try it and try to continue. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No problem. So I could not agree more with Commissioner Kyriakides' statement from yesterday. The biggest challenges are the loss of biodiversity and are the climate crisis. But I think let's tackle the real dimension of the problem. I mean, in a lot of European countries in the last years, we faced most extreme weather conditions since countries started reporting weather. We had in some countries floods, in other countries the hottest summer or the second hottest summer. And there is no indication that this impact of the climate change will slow down. So what we need is an arable farming system that actually can cope with extreme weather conditions that cannot be predicted. And for this, I think we need a very diverse, very resilient food system. So we are in favor of innovation. We are in favor how technology can support farmers to produce the food that we all need. But if you think in this direction, so which crop can cope with an extreme drought in summer, when the cereal is actually producing the kernels, and then maybe faced that the whole field is flooded for various weeks over summer? And you think about systems like this, I think we really need innovative plant breeding. We really need actually thinking out of the box, challenge our assumptions, that maybe what is needed is a very other way how we do arable cropping, that we combine not only 2 different crops on one field, maybe do not combine a leguminous with a cereal. Maybe we really need to think out of the box, that we grow 4, 5, 8 different crops. And then we need plant breeders who are deliver these plants, who can deliver any kind of harvest. And we need technology support, how you put the seeds in the ground, how you can foster them, how you can harvest them. And I think for this, we really need to be honest also with the farmers we work with, that the current way how we do arable farming might not ensure an income for farmers, might not ensure any kind of acceptable yields to feed the people in Europe. So if we look at gene technology, we think we really need to have effective solutions that must be two-branched. It must, on one hand, both reduce the environmental impact on agriculture and also make the sector much more resilient to the climate impacts. And honestly, as we just heard, CRISPR is a very new technology, so we don't know the long-term impacts of it. And we don't know if these technologies will be ready or scalable now. They are all in the pipeline, they're research. There's hardly anything on the market, also not in other regions. And we don't know how GM-modified crops can cope in different weather and different soil conditions. But what we know is that agroecology and organic farming practices already work to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. They build crop resilience and they stabilize yields. So these are practices that have worked for decades or centuries, and we can continue to work on them in the future to be ready for the big challenges and the innovation that we need. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, it was Mutter Schimpf, und jetzt, now I will give the space to Luc Haustermans.
Okay, since it's a panel, I'll try to first of all build on what is said up to now. But maybe to first start with thanking you for being here, the opportunity, and also to quickly say who Yara is. So as Yara, we are a company stock listed in Norway. We're a global multinational active with operations in 60 countries, and we have installations in 13 European countries, and we sell to 160 countries, of which 30 are in Europe. So we really have both the European perspective on this, which is our home base, as the global perspective. Maybe first to take then back to the question, let's say that there was a reason why I switched personally from being in innovation to in corporate affairs. Because we have a lot of solutions available. And in the case of Yara, first of all, this started from the standpoint that we also have to do our part in addressing climate change. because agriculture is a big part of the global emissions, and within that, fertilizer production globally is somewhere 5 to 6% of agricultural emissions. So we as a sector and as operators also need to do our part. And so next year we will start producing, and that's actually going back to where we were founded in 1905, producing again with renewable hydropower in Norway, and we're looking at projects with renewable power in wind power in other countries of Europe. Does that matter? Yes, it reduces the footprint of fertilizers with 80 to 90%, and if you then look at the carbon footprint of wheat, it gets up to 20% carbon footprint reduction. Getting back to the, let's say, the more broader thematic of this conference, so a lot hinges on the farm to fork. As Yara, we actually support the goal of reducing nutrient losses by 50%. And we have a very similar analysis as was done by the Commission and which was done by many scientists, that this is possible. And it's necessary, because the best way of reducing both the direct environmental footprint around the farm as the footprint on the climate is to use your fertilizers more efficiently, to have them end up in the crop and nowhere else. And then they indeed form their function, which is replacing the nutrients which are taken away by the harvest. However, we see that we are launching many solutions on precision farming. We are trying to develop more products first for organic farming, but also we are working on recovering, for example, sewage sludge and turn those into fertilizers to close a circular economy. And just already by using the right fertilizer together with precision farming, you can reduce fertilizers use just 20%, which is perfect for the farm to fork target. You actually increase the yield, and both the cost for the farmer goes down and the climate footprint is improved. And that is a bit our, let's say, frustration as Yara, that we see that even the simple solutions, which are not controversial, there's nobody who actually challenges us that we should use precision farming. It's not a societal debate, and nevertheless we struggle to see that being implemented broadly enough to have a real impact. And then where do we see the, let's say, the solutions, or why are we engaging then, also me personally and as company, why are we engaging in this public debate? On one hand, indeed, because the regulators, such as the European Commission, play an important role. National governments play an important role, because the Common Agricultural Policy, the plans, actually contain some of our biggest disappointments in how they would foster better crop nutrition practices. So they play a big role, but it's also a societal issue. So if a farmer does not get paid for an improved footprint, then it's much harder to convince the farmer to change his practice. And up to now, we still see the need to further develop that drive, and that requires, on one hand, a lot of transparency, because the customer has to trust, and on the other hand, a value chain that is collaborating. And with certain companies, international players, we see definitely that willingness, but we don't see it everywhere fast enough to scale. So in short, yes, we think that we have the right ambition. We actually think we have a lot of solutions on the table, but we need to continue innovating. But we need to start implementing much faster if you really want to address the challenges on sustainability. And then to finally make the last comment, I think within the current crisis, we have realized on one hand how important food production is, but we have also realized that fertilizers play an enormous role in maintaining food production. And yes, we need to reduce the use of fertilizers per ton of crop output, but they play an important role into making farming productive and into feeding the world. And in the current disruptions that we see in the market, yes, we see that problem appearing. And yes, already in March, our CEO came out with a message very clearly saying, we can't say whether this will harm or benefit Yara, and at the moment it's still results in positive profits for Yara, but we are very concerned that this is leading to additional hunger. And so according to current estimates, 200 million people are more exposed now to potential hunger risk than before the crisis broke out. So I think we have a responsibility to continue looking for the solutions which on one hand maintain productivity, which maintain the global flow of crops, and on the other hand definitely address this urgent problem which is climate change.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks to Luc Haustermans from Yara. And the same question for Mr. Neal Evans. Are we ready to face challenges like climate changes, drought, new genomic techniques, and so on?
Oh, sure. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to Sankmu, and also thank you for this rather natty tie, which is
really beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. So thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, basically, the voluntary initiative is a bit of a strange organisation, and the area that we work in is, ensuring the sustainability of crop production. And specifically promoting the responsible use of pesticides. And, in terms of the issues that we were asked to address, I agree with Emily here that, I think the largest challenge we face is perhaps climate change. So I'd like to basically take a focus on two areas. Firstly, climate change. We heard yesterday that there's a 1.5 degree change by 2030, which is the target date that we're all aiming at. But also to focus in on sustainability as well. And then after I've spoken about climate change, we'll take you through some of the voluntary initiative work. So basically, I'm a plant pathologist, unlike many of you who are geneticists. So I have no real experience in the NGT world, to be fair. But I thought I'd take a leaf out of Olivia de Matos' book from yesterday and take you through a real-life experience that I had. Basically, I did my PhD in Scotland, and there you can see I took the liberty, I hope you don't mind, of showing a nice picture for the end of the conference. So this is the Three Sisters, which are three mountains in Glencoe, in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a rather beautiful area. And in actual fact, I took this picture about 3 weeks ago when we were on vacation, introducing our son, who is now 20, to places where we used to live and showing him what a beautiful country it is. So I did my PhD at Glasgow, working back in the early 90s, and it was a project on linseed. And it was an EU-funded project, and I think you'll probably remember at the time the EU had a big project to try and become self-sufficient in oilseeds and not be reliant on the likes of Ukraine and Russia. So, but being a plant pathologist, we see sort of death and disease everywhere, really, and even taking the dog for a walk on the park, I see rust on grasses and mildew in the groundsel. But that sort of brings to my attention that there's this natural equilibrium within nature. And, perhaps there's something to be said for a degree of tolerance with some of these biotrophic pathogens. And this is perhaps an area that we could have a think about in terms of farming as well. Perhaps there's a level of tolerance of pests and diseases that we can allow before we need to actually intervene. So we heard from a couple of farmers yesterday who didn't really feel very included in the discussion. And this will be a running theme through this statement. And that's really all about communication. They didn't really care that it was a GMO or whatever. They just wanted the seed. They just wanted access to that technology. So basically, building on the plant pathology theme, I'm introducing the disease triangle now. So for plant pathogens to take effect, you need a susceptible host, a pathogenic organism, fungus or bacteria, but also you need the environmental aspect to be correct. So I was working on Alternaria linicola of linseed, and after I'd completed my PhD, I was invited to go across to California to work on pistachios. So if you haven't seen a pistachio tree before, I'll just sort of describe them. They're sort of 4 to 6 meters high, so fairly large and bushy. And if you've never seen agriculture in California, then it's a totally different scale. You would have 10 kilometers of pistachio with 10 kilometers of pistachio. Huge. It's all one clone, so you're talking a real proper monoculture. So I arrived in California to work on Alternaria, but the previous year, or 2 years previously, a new disease called Botryophiria, which isn't a nice disease, it's a necrotroph, so it's basically a killing disease, had jumped species from the coastal redwoods onto the pistachio orchards in the north of California, and it was slowly wiping the industry out. So all of the focus of our laboratory went to work on Botryophiria. And it was really interesting that the only way that we could do this was to develop an integrated pest management scheme that had 2 basic principles. There was the ability of the growers to actually prune and use cultural control to get the disease under control, but we also had to involve a robust fungicide program to get the disease under control. So I think that just sort of proves the importance of chemicals that we use every day that can be part of an integrated pest management plan. So that was California. Now on to sustainability and the work of the voluntary initiative. It's actually our 21st birthday this year, and that's kind of key because the voluntary initiative was raised back in 2001 in response to Tony Blair, Prime Minister at the time, and his government, who suggested that there was a need to introduce a pesticide tax. And the industry didn't think that was a very productive idea and got together and developed this voluntary initiative on pesticide use, as we were originally called. And we've been doing various bits and pieces, aspects of work since then, and the idea was that the industry would become self-regulatory and that we would use best practice use of pesticides, but only when required. And we developed 3 schemes. That's the National Register of Sprayer Operators, which originally had 8,000 operators, and the National Sprayer Testing Scheme. And we now have 21,000 sprayer operators, and the NSTS, the National Sprayer Testing Scheme, tests about 18,000 sprayers per year in the UK, which obviously isn't a particularly huge country. We also have crop management plans, which were developed about 15 years ago, and we have now redesigned those to become integrated pest management plans, and we have about 10 to 15,000 growers completing those each year. Over the years, much of the voluntary initiative work is to do with water campaigns, working with the water companies. And I'm going to be speaking with some of the colleagues in the room about this tomorrow in some future meetings. But I'll just give you an example of a use of integrated pest management. A lot of the work that we do is on oilseed rape herbicides. And the oilseed rape herbicides are grown using the oilseed rape as a break crop to basically clean up the land for the target species, which is blackgrass, which is a major pest of UK agriculture. And propyzamide is the main chemical that's used in this work program. And some of you might know that propyzamide is a very mobile compound in the soil, so it really does tend to get into the water. So we've basically been doing a lot of work with the growers and with spray operators, introducing the need for 6-meter buffer zones and other dedicated aspects of work to help prevent the chemicals getting into water. So I've got another example, but we're running short of time, so I'll just dip over that. So in terms of the voluntary initiative, we're basically looking at a holistic approach to integrated pest management especially in the light of the loss of so many actives over the years, a lack of new products coming through the pipeline, and a need to retain the current toolbox. So that's about it from me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. By the way, beautiful landscape in Scotland you have. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to thank you to Neal Evans, and last but not least, Professor Zdeněk Opatrný, which is at home here. Pane profesore, tak prostor je váš. Myslím, že by měl...
The floor is yours, sir.
Je to tak. Dobře, last but not least, já v první řadě jsem rád, že jsem tady, vidím mnoho poslouchajících uší. Za druhé za prvé velmi děkuji organizátorům, že mi nabídli tuto příležitost, to znamená nejenom poslouchat velmi zajímavým příspěvkům, ale dokonce i do toho mluvit, což občas činím rád, ale slibuji moderátorce.
I also would like to promise the moderator. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear the translation? Mm-hmm. Well, I apologize for not speaking English, but as I presented my paper, as I was thinking about my paper 5 times perhaps, and therefore I will improvise and speak in my native tongue. Let me respond to what has been said. When we opened this panel. First of all, I was sort of fascinated by 2 previous colleagues, Professor Doležal and Aleš Petčínka. But fresh water, so to say, for me was the contribution of Mike from Iowa. Because if it is sort of copied and sent all over the country to schools and farms, it could be taken as a school aid, educational aid. Why do I say so? In my lifetime, I worked in 3 areas. Experimental botanics, so it is the Research Institute of Experimental Botany. Some of our speakers worked there. Then 10 years, I would be working in the Central Botany or Plant Production Institute. And then I worked at the faculty of the university, and I always make some comparison between these stages of my life. Nevertheless, the key field was the basic research for me. And for many years, I follow how we try hard to imitate evolution. And the papers presented here, I was fascinated, perhaps not totally fascinated, but it was said that we will wait with the application of these methods once we have the tool necessary for implementing them. But we have these tools for perhaps more than 30 years. And in case of new breeding techniques, we have them tested. So it's nothing but the legislation and explanation to those farmers who were not yet trained in it. We should explain them how to use these techniques and what they may expect. The studies of plant biology or study of high temperature, salinity, and drought-resistant plants. Well, these techniques have been in use for more than 10 years. I may mention tolerant drought, and it was, if I'm not mistaken, Pioneer 2010, and the Ingenta followed, and then other companies who sell those varieties on the market, and they are largely used. The question is to what extent we will be able to apply them in the European farming, and to what extent we would be able to implement the NGTs. And I'm slightly malformed, so to say, by the basic research. But we should really try how to distinguish exactly what is due to CRISPR and what is due to urea or what is due to nature. From the certain point of view, I consider this to be a waste of time and waste of money. In conclusion, and you may comment on my conclusions, I would say that what I miss in this program, or agenda rather, is the communication with audience, communication with broad society. In other words, specific focus on explaining to the public what it all means. And this very process was lacking in the very beginning of GM. That was started with tomatoes, and the general public was not informed and didn't know a clue of it. One of the possible examples, I have a publication, but in Czech, I'm sorry. I apologize to my English-speaking colleagues. So this is a review for elementary and secondary schools. Because at our faculty we teach students not only what to teach, but also how to teach. And so this is an edition from 2011 on GE plants, resistant to drought, salt, etc. In majority of textbooks for secondary school students, nothing like this can be found in the Czech Republic. Well, and still these are things of enormous importance. And let me say heretic question, sorry. Well, it was said that perhaps we will manage by 2024, 2025, that the Commission will, or the Commission will accept a sort of reasonable legislation, or adopt rather. So perhaps implementation for classical breeding, conventional breeding, would be sufficient. As it is the case in many countries of the world. But my question is as follows. On behalf of the organic farmers, what are they going to do with that? Because the combination of the precision mutagenesis and if I am allergic on GM and the requirements of the organic farming, on the other hand, it means natural resistance to various stresses, possibility to use acceptable insecticides. My question is whether they will be able to use it if they have certain limits, saying that no industrial fertilizers, no GMOs, and things like that. Well, the question is to what extent, not only the public, but also the organic farmer community would be willing to modify their ways of thinking, publicity strategies, etc. I don't know whether I exceeded my 5 minutes, but still I thank you very much for your patience and for your willingness to listen to this improvised talk. And I'm very glad that I am here with you. Thank you very much, Professor, for being with us. You said, I'm astonished to see how our capacity to imitate evolution is great. Ladies and gentlemen, let us open the discussion.
Guest, and I remind you that Schimpf is still with us, but online. So now it's the time for your questions. Yes, please, microphone.
Dobrý den, Martin Such.
Good morning or good afternoon, Martin Suchanek, Bio Preparations or Products Company. I wish to boast of pride in the Czech Republic. In microbial products have started being developed in 1970s. Microparasitic fungi, especially for crops or plants. And 30 years ago, we picked one of the research clones, which is now broadly registered or authorized in the EU, and we want to replace the lower functionality of fungicide or pesticides, especially in terms of the protection of soil pathogens and root systems. So I would like to ask Mr. Neal Evans, and we would happily send him some samples if we can have Alternaria vesticera, what tests on the rapeseed. We would very much appreciate it if you would be kind enough and analyze the samples.
Please, for answer to Mr. Evans.
Well, thank you very much for the question. Unfortunately, I no longer work in research, so I'm not the best person to send some samples to. But if you catch me after during lunch, then I could probably pass you on to some of my former colleagues. I hope that is okay.
Thank you. Another one?
I'm Pavel Horčička.
Horčička with breeder.
For Luc and for Professor Opatrný. If there is still a valid Liebig law of minimum, I mean concerning nitrogen, because otherwise we are talking that NBT solve everything, but that's my question.
Yeah, question for Luc Haustermans and for Professor Opatrný.
Yes, the problem is...
So is the Liebig law of minimum still valid? Yes, I'm not an agronomist, but as far as I listen to my colleagues, yes, it still remains one of the biggest brakes on crop growth. And it's also a circle which is very hard or almost impossible to close. What I mean is, yes, you can recover a lot of the phosphorus, for example, from waste, but along the whole process you have the natural emissions of nitrogen which return it to the place where it originally was, which was the air as N2. So yes, it's still the case. If the underlying question is, do we of course look at what will GMOs mean for future nitrogen use and nitrogen fixation? Yes, of course, as a company we look at that. Let's say that as our internal assessment is nuanced. We think that we still have enough time to reinvent ourselves as a company before that's really resolving the world's need for nitrogen. But of course, it's something we are very interested in, and possibly there are applications where this makes very much sense.
Thank you, Mr. Haustermans.
No more comment.
And you can react, of course.
I just wanted to add that, so we are looking at how we can address nitrogen with gene editing technology. So within corn, so within each of the crops that Inari is addressing, we've set goals. And within corn, our goal is to increase yield by 10% while simultaneously driving down the need for water and nitrogen by up to 40%. So these are goals, and they're big goals, and we're not going to hit them with the first products. But we do have reason to believe that we found pathways that will help us get there through the natural genes of the plant.
So are you satisfied with these answers? Yeah? Okay. Another one has a question? If not, let me focus on Mute Schimpf. If she is still with us. No, she isn't. Okay, we will try connection again. Maybe my question for Neal Evans. From your point of view, which is the bigger threat, climate change or political decisions?
Thank you for the question. I would say climate change, because I've already given an example that it's happening. Some of the models that we developed whilst I was at Rothamsted that you mentioned previously, we used those disease decision support models and actually input climate change data. Modeled for 2030 and 2050. And that was 10, 15 years ago. And now we are seeing those new diseases coming in the UK. So it's actually happening. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably the best thing to say. And also, political change doesn't always have to be for the worst, and it's something that can change.
Thank you. Let me give the same question to Luc Haustermans.
I actually don't have very much more to add. No, I think that indeed climate change is the biggest issue and the biggest challenge, and we have many solutions, and part of the solution is political coordination, and we see that there is a much stronger demand from our societies to address this challenge. But of course, it's not only up to the political world, it's also up to companies, their own commitment, it's up to consumers, it's up to everybody in society. But it's definitely the most complex challenge because it has so many angles, even if you just look at the environment from an agricultural standpoint.
Thank you very much. Someone wants to react on this question? No? In auditorium, yeah? Mr. Hlaváček?
No. Thanks a lot for the floor. I bluntly disagree with the opinion and the standpoint, because for more than 20 years we have been addressing climate change, and I managed to grow old over that time, and we haven't moved ahead by a single millimeter. We keep talking, discussing, debating, but for me, that is a farmer, for me as a consumer, the inability of the European Union to make the decision within a reasonable time and start implementing things is incredible. Therefore, I will ask a question. I don't know who is going to take it and try to respond. It's the following. Is it possible that the European Commission and European Parliament adopt the relevant legislation in a fast-track procedure at the time of war, at the time of extreme degree of uncertainty and extraordinary events? Well, I wonder who is going to take that and try to give an answer to Mr. Hlaváček.
Nikdo, berme to spíš jako...
No one, so perhaps let us take it as a proposal for further reflection. Maybe, look.
An answer to your question itself, but just to make it concrete about advancing. So, as Yara, yes, we have already reduced our own footprint with 57% in Europe and 45% worldwide. But indeed, to go to that climate neutral fertilizer is economically a massive step. And it's a massive step also for farmers because it's expensive. If you, however, look at the price that it will affect on the supermarket shelf of potatoes, of bread or so on, we are really literally talking less than 10 euro cent per kilo, or we are really talking about numbers that don't matter for, let's say, average consumers in our European society. And yes, that is also a frustration I share, that we can't get that sorted out.
Thank you very much. Thanks to Luc Haustermans. Dámy a pánové,
ladies and gentlemen, at this moment I would like to apologize Ms. Mutashim has had to disconnect from the conference, so in case that any of you has a question to her, so right now it is not possible anymore. Nevertheless, I am very glad that at least part of this panel discussions may continue, and I have an appeal to you, audience, whether or not you have a question to raise to our distinguished guests. And it's the last chance, because in a while probably we will get slowly to the conclusion of our conference. Obviously, then we will be invited for the final lunch. Ladies and gentlemen, I perhaps pose a question that I've prepared for Schimpf and as well as other guests.
Farming is beneficial for sustainability, and in what way? No, pan profesor se usmívá.
Professor is smiling. I consider organic farming as a nice manifestation of human freedom to grow plants the way my grandpa just did. Absolute organic farming, it was his case. And if I imagine this country being full of small farms, so that's very nice to imagine. But if I take the reality, the present reality, so I think that this is not a solution. And in times when I traveled to Brussels, when I used to go to Brussels, so within agriculture, food science and biotechnology program, we have had our group, and next door it was the organic farming group. Professor Urs Nigli, the name can be known to many of you, Swiss professor, as a guru of this technology. And we often discussed fiercely, and we always came to an agreement. And approximately 2 years ago, I realized that he's not that much liked in Switzerland, because he said that if we use NGT techniques for breeding of various plants and crops, well, it will mean that we will get slowly to what has been mentioned, namely the new full or partial domestication of plants. In other words, we will return the genes to these plants, the genes that they desperately need, and we will not be forced to use chemical plants. So this is part of the organic farming strategy, and if I'm to trust journalists, well, the organic general public responded, claiming that Mr. Nigli should be nosed in future. I'm sorry for this expression, but it was exactly as they put it. Well, it's a question on when the reasonable tolerance is to end, thinking about common sense things, if you add pure ideology. And if you add the set 25% to be of organic nature in future, plus all these draconic restrictions. So unfortunately, really, I do not think that organic farming would be that marvelous solution for the future of sustainable Europe. I'm sorry to be so eloquent, but that's the way I look at it. Thank you very much. In this respect, I link in to words of Mr. Opatrný with a brief question to Neal and Luc.
Are socio-economic impacts and the needs of the EU population not forgotten when taking environmental protection measures? So, gentlemen, who first?
Okay, I'm the volunteer to answer first. So, no, I think it's unfair to say that it's forgotten. If there's one thing which we are good at in European policy making is doing consultations and writing impact assessments. So I don't think it's entirely unfair to say that this is forgotten. However, I think the public debate about it is still, let's say, too much focused on slogans. In the end, what we discussed a lot during these 2 days is about trade-offs. Yes, you have a preferred scenario, and yes, I also like the quality of good organic food from my local farmer, but I'm also very much aware of the global food production needs. I'm also aware of what the benefits are of genomic techniques, but I also have as a person individual some concerns. But that's all about trade-offs. And that's a difficult discussion, which is maybe not about do we forget these socioeconomic impacts, but do we have the right level of debate and indeed education, as you said.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a think about this as well and wrote down some notes. So I'm just going to have a quick read of this. Basically the fact that everybody needs a healthy, sustainable environment is, I think, well understood. So its protection is important to us all. However, when you look at some of the actions that we have taken in the name of protecting the environment, we have to sort of question whether they have been proportionate or not. And to better understand whether the actions that we are taking are proportionate, there ought to be a proper impact assessment undertaken, and that could also look at socio-economic factors. It's clear that proposed actions have a cost. Then we ought to have some level of certainty that the benefit will be worth it and the benefit will outweigh the cost.
Thank you very much. Dámy a pánové, tak má ještě někdo nějaký...
Ladies and gentlemen, are there any more questions to be addressed to our dear distinguished guests or not? If that is not the case, allow me, since you are the final guest or guest of the final session here today of our conference, would you please one by one share with us a brief message? A message simply associated with agri-food sustainability and security. Professor, the floor is yours. I do wish that feasible, that simply the dreams of future agriculture in Europe become reality before we are hit by yet another disaster which we will have to address. And I'm pleasantly surprised seeing the high number of listeners here in the auditorium. Thank you, and thank you for your participation. Mr. Luc Haustermans,
Yes, so I think we all agree in this room that addressing both the goal of productive farming to feed the world and making it more sustainable is a big challenge. The tagline of my company is knowledge grows, and that's not to be cheesy. I think as all stakeholders here in this room, we have a duty to share that knowledge, to continue working towards solutions, and most of all, implement them.
Thank you.
So I would leave you with the thought of, I think everyone here agreed that our biggest challenge really is climate change. And we are plainly running out of time. Could we rely on Mother Nature to adapt? Because she has adapted before, and yes, but when we look at how long it takes for nature to adapt on its own, we don't have that kind of time. It's the one luxury we are truly running out of at this point. And I think that's the beauty of new technology like gene editing, is it allows us to enhance the natural processes within a plant and help us get nature to adapt quicker so that we can meet the multiple demands that are coming upon the farming community.
Emily Negrin, thank you for being us.
Well, I think the final word goes to me. So thank you very much. I think we've all heard and we all agree that the Farm to Fork proposal is very ambitious in a very short timescale. But I think it all comes back to what I just mentioned, proportionality, and that there's a real need for us to be reasonable in terms of what is possible and to approach it with a level of balance.
Thank you. Dámy a pánové, tak to už byly definice.
Ladies and gentlemen, these were the very last comments of our international conference, which we had the opportunity to attend. European Agri-Food Sustainability Innovation was the name of the conference. And I do hope you have received a lot of food for thought. I wish to thank all the participants who have actually presented here yesterday, today, and forever will be on the video recording that will be made available to you on the website of Ministry of Agriculture of the Czech Republic. We wish to most cordially thank Jitka Gecová, the director, and the whole team led by Zuzana Malinová for excellent organization of this huge or major event, and they've managed to bring together so many experts and so many persons with multiple perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, I do believe that you will go back home filled with new ideas and perhaps also well rested. I do wish you a safe trip back home. Advent has already started, so for many of you perhaps this will be a hectic period, while for others it'll be a period of rest and relaxation. I wish all the best to you and to common agriculture across the EU. And now I'd like to invite you to lunch. Thank you very much.